Welcome to Design with Impact, the podcast for interior designers who want to create beautiful, healthy spaces with intention and purpose. I'm Alex, interior designer, mom, entrepreneur, and educator, and I am truly passionate about sustainability. After seeing the amount of waste our industry creates and learning how everyday materials can impact our health, I completely changed the way I approach design. And now I want to help more designers do the same. Each week, through solo episodes and conversations with industry experts, we'll explore sustainable materials, healthier homes, and circular design, along with practical strategies to reduce waste, grow a sustainable business, and market your work with intention, so you can create real impact without sacrificing aesthetics or profitability. Because sustainability isn't optional, it's the future of design. Welcome to the Design with Impact podcast. I'm your host, Alex Shield, and today we're going to be speaking with Desiree Dupuis. With over 2 decades of experience in brand development, storytelling, and purpose-driven marketing, Desiree is a force for conscious change. As a social entrepreneur, author, and speaker, she is redefining industries through sustainability, ethics, and innovation. Desiree is the founder of Voes Co, a global vegan footwear brand on a mission to revolutionize fashion with next-generation materials, proving that style, comfort, and sustainability can coexist without compromise. Hi, Desiree. Welcome to the show. I am so excited for our conversation today.
Hey, Alex. Me too. I'm honored to be a guest. I've never spoken to a group of interior designers before, so it's a big thrill for me to be here.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to start Voes Co.
Yeah, I think there's obviously 2 big components about my background. One is that and they both started in 2008. So 2008 was a really big pivotal year for me. It's the year that I read a life-changing book called Skinny Bitch, which essentially opened my eyes to animal agriculture, and I went vegan overnight after reading that book. And around the same time, I left my full-time corporate job and started on the journey of being self-employed and being an entrepreneur. And so I spent about 7 years being self-employed, solving problems, and just building different businesses. And so that led to me, over the course of 7, 8 years, getting stronger and stronger in terms of my vegan values. And the thing that was most challenging with my vegan values was the fashion side of it, because food for me is like I already ate pretty much plant-based. I'm very healthy. I like whole foods. I love fruits and vegetables. But finding like non-leather items. And then as I became more aware of the environmental impact of animal agriculture, that also became a driving force in terms of me really wanting to solve a problem, which was, finding designer shoes not made of animal materials like leather or suede, and alternatively not just made of plastic petroleum-based materials like PE or PVC. And because I was already like an entrepreneur and self-employed, I just had the DNA in my personality to start my own business. And I consider myself a branding person. I love brand, I love design, I love fonts and colors and building a mission statement and what a brand can really be and represent for people. And I was someone that really longed for a brand that represented the values of veganism, which does not exist and did not exist. So all of those components really came together to create Voes Co.
Okay, so then what was the specific moment, or did you have sort of a realization that made you decide that your business had to fully align with your values? So, I mean, there's obviously the materials part, but you've built your whole business around your values.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the benefit of creating a business to solve my own problem, because my values existed before the business, and the business exists because of my values. And so I knew when I started Voes, which stands for vegan shoes, that everything through and throughout the brand would be not only 100% animal free and vegan, but one of the main, literally the reason I started the brand was for environmental reasons. And so that will always fundamentally be like a big part of the ethos of the company, is to do things that are more friendly for the environment, less, again, like I was really trying to solve the plastic problem in fashion, specifically in vegan fashion. And so, and on top of that, creating a brand, a vegan brand, an iconic vegan brand that that would be recognizable globally just as easily as like a Nike swoosh, that represents the values of veganism, which again is like no harm to animals and a lot better for the planet. And so because of the foundation of why I created Voes, every single component of the brand, from supply chain to materials to, manufacturing partners to packaging, like everything has to incorporate those values.
I love that so much. So you've built a brand that is deeply rooted in ethics, in sustainability. So what were the core values that you knew had to guide every decision from the start?
Yeah, absolutely veganism. So I think I'm gonna say this word until I'm like blue in the face, but it's, through and through a vegan brand. So and again, like I talk a lot about like the ethos being and the MO being environmental purposes, but as a vegan brand, it is all about the animals. And so my goal and my biggest, like largest intention is to support the welfare of as many animals as possible. And so that's also a driving force, is like, how do we make sure animals are taken care of in terms of like our giving back practices? I mean, my dream is to eventually have our own animal sanctuary or sanctuaries around the world. And of course, like the premise of the brand, the reason I am vegan is my main value is love. And like I'm a lover of life. I'm a Cancer. I'm like very emotional. I feel things strongly. And so not only do I love animals, but I love the planet. I'm obsessed with nature and I love people. And so I want like the values of love to also be very embedded in everything that we do. Like I want people, our consumers, our community to feel loved and taken care of and to know that they matter. I want the people that are, a part of our manufacturing team and building the product to be taken care of, to be respected, to feel loved. Of course, I want animals to feel loved. And I want, the planet to feel loved. And so that is like on top of everything, or the base of everything is really, and that's why our tagline is "You are loved," because I think it's just like the highest frequency of life. And as a vegan person, to love animals, hopefully that means that you love people and you love humanity and you love the planet as well.
I love that so much. I didn't know that was your "You Are Loved." That's I love that whole story behind that because I do have a pair of your boots and it has that on there. So, and I got a little card that said that I am loved. I love it. So then how did these values, how did they influence your brand identity? So not just the products, but the storytelling, the messaging, and your overall customer experience.
Yeah, I think based on what I just said, just about the fact that I really want people to feel loved, I think one of my strengths is that I'm like a very non-judgmental person. I'm a very accepting, inclusive person. And as a vegan, I'm sure you can relate. Like a lot of times I felt like an outlier. I haven't felt included. I've sat at a dinner table. I've sat at a dinner table way more times than I can count where I'm the only one eating my segmented, vegan mashed potatoes and everyone else is having mashed potatoes with dairy. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm the only one. I'm not sharing food. I'm not breaking bread with
Sure.
everybody. I've a lot of my life, I've felt like an outsider, an outlier. And so that's another driving part of the You Are Loved, is that I really want our community, anyone that comes across the brand, to feel that they are accepted, that they are included, that they are like wrapped with a warm hug. And so I think the intention with all of our communication is to it's a fine line, because I do obviously have very strong beliefs about animal agriculture, and I just think that it's horrific and horrendous, and I want to like rant and rave. But I also can appreciate, understand when people that are not fully vegan or living in a non-vegan society, to try not to judge and just to try to feel like one of our values for the brand is charm. And so we try to do everything with like love, like everyone is carrying so much weight on our shoulders, and so to add more pressure to people is not what we want. So I want to make it, again, like welcoming, inclusive, charming, fun, light, even though it's a very heavy, serious topic. And so yeah, I think in terms of like the whole brand experience, it's meant to feel like a warm hug. And hopefully all of our communication helps, and the
Oh,
way I speak and the things that I say and how I share it, hopefully that represents that feeling.
I do definitely feel that with your brand. So you're doing a good job. So then the leather industry is so deeply embedded in fashion. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in choosing to go against that norm?
It's an ongoing challenge because it's deconstructing this myth that leather is the gold standard for luxury, for quality, for durability. And unfortunately, for the past few decades, we've done the best that we can in terms of vegan leathers, but they haven't necessarily been able to stand up in terms of quality and durability. We all know there's like, the plasticky, flaky, breakable pleathers, the plastic leathers, the vegan leathers. And so it's a big uphill mountain to climb now that we are using, what's called next generation plant-based vegan leathers, which are night and day in terms of quality and durability and breathability from the polyurethanes and the PVCs from back in the day. But yeah, it's just this whole perception of leather in society, which to me is mind blowing because at the end of the day, leather is the dead rotting skin of an animal, and to have that as like this like gold standard of luxury. And I hope, we've made a lot of progress in terms of fur, in terms of feathers, and I'm hoping that now with all the education and transparency that people, I mean, this is what I'm betting on, is that people are going to start to see that leather is essentially the same, if not even worse at scale, because, 1 billion animals a year are killed from animal agriculture, huge part of that being cattle, a huge driving force of that being leather. Leather is a huge contributor to the deforestation of the Amazon, huge contributor to methane, the potent methane gases and greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think if we really start to break down and see what leather really is, we can no longer hold it as that gold standard of luxury, but it's a lot of heavy lifting and it's a lot of education.
Hmm. So there are a lot of ethical issues with leather, environmental. There's social issues with leather too. The people who are making the leather, and having to deal with the chemicals and the chemicals that are dumped into the water streams. It's really a really huge issue that we don't see, that we don't talk about. So I'm glad that you're bringing some light to this and educating as well is part of what you do. So what are the alternatives then? If we want, like, so again, like you said, leather's like the gold standard. What if we want something like leather, like you said, pleather, it comes apart. What are these next gen leathers? What are they made of? Are they durable?
Yeah, innovation has come so far. So it's great timing for me because as soon as I started to have this idea for creating something different than just plastic vegan leather with the brand, around 2018, 2019 is when the first innovations started coming to market. So the biggest two were Deserto cactus leather and Pinatex pineapple leather.
Mm,
And so now there's people innovating with almost every type of fruit. There's apple leather, banana leather, mango leather, grape leather, corn leather, and these are the next best solution. Even like my boots are made with cactus leather, so you can see like the material quality is it's the biggest thing for me is the durability and the breathability. So with cactus leather, the environmental components are so strong because the cactus comes from a no-ball cactus ranch that uses I have a stat written here actually. Deserto cactus leather uses 164,000% less water than traditional animal leather. So from an environmental perspective, it's like night and day. And now in terms of quality and durability, you're getting long lasting quality, durability with these next generation plant leathers. Even further now, we have companies like Uncaged Innovations that are developing leathers, plant leathers from agricultural waste and are actually completely plastic free, where they don't even have any bio PU components or any plastic components at all. And I think the North Star of where we're going, the materials that we seek to use are as plastic free as possible. And then eventually the innovation, and again, this is where consumers come into play, because even though the solutions might not be perfect now, the more we buy these solutions, the more we support the brands that are innovating and developing. So if you buy a pair of Voes shoes, let's say, you're not only supporting me, but you're supporting my purchase of materials, which is then feeding into the innovation in the material space of these companies that are innovating. And so even though we might not have a perfect solution today, the more money that goes into the industry, the more we can develop and get towards that North Star where it's plastic free, just as durable, just as high quality, can go back to the earth when you're done with it. So that biodegradable component, chemical free component, like you said, all of the chemicals that are used to color, which is like tanning, like leather needs to be colored, it needs to be protected. There's like formaldehyde and chromium and resin, and there's still a lot of plastic also that goes into the leather production. And so I'm going on a little bit of a rant because I'm really passionate about it, but it is very inspiring because a lot of the innovation happening today in this moment and that is going to come is that the plant-based materials, like I mentioned, cactus leather or even Elevate from Uncaged Innovations, are offering almost completely plastic free with just as high level of quality, durability, breathability, and luxurious texture and feel.
I love that. That's so cool. And I know you've played around with some different materials too. So that's it's cool to know sort of what your standards are and what you're looking for. And I guess it's about finding the right material and testing it. I feel like finding the right materials for your product as well as finding the right manufacturers would be, some of the biggest barriers probably that you're facing. How did you go about sourcing vegan materials and aligning with the right production partners?
Yeah, great question. I mean, that's exactly what we've had to do to create and build, the shoes and the brand that I've desired. And I think, again, it was just timing. I kind of spoke about it, how in 2018, 2019 is when Desiree first came out with cactus leather. So immediately, a lot of friends knew what I was doing and sent me articles about Desiree, about the cactus leather. So I immediately was able to get swatches and samples, and we immediately started working with Desiree cactus leather and have been since that time. In terms of, I think it's taken the brand a lot longer to get to where we are because it isn't easy to find materials and manufacturing, especially that checks the boxes, right? Like, because the main driver of the brand is environmental, I really look to find a manufacturer in Canada, in North America. We first started with a manufacturer actually out of New York and realized during our first, beta run that this was not a manufacturer that we would be able to scale with. There were quality problems, there were timing issues. And so luckily, thankfully, we actually were able to find a fully vegan manufacturer in Brazil. Actually, their name is Ahimsa, which stands for nonviolence. And yeah, so now we work with the only vegan manufacturer in the world. And it's great because they also have an environmental motivation. And obviously, they're in Brazil, so we have a higher standard of labor practices. We've been able to visit and do tours of the facility and build a relationship with Ahimsa. And so, yeah, I think it's trial and error for sure. We've had different quality problems with, like, we've tried to use corn leather and even some of the batches of cactus leather have not been perfect. So again, it's like patience, trial and error, but sticking to those things that are a non-negotiable.
And I love that you're doing this, even though the materials are so new. I have been looking at all of those materials as well. I'm creating a line of pillows with these materials. And it's interesting because I go and talk to people and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing. And a lot of people are like, what? What is this? I had ottomans. I bought ottomans off of Marketplace and had them reupholstered in coconut leather. And the upholsterer was like, what? And it was cool and it was different. But I love that you're doing this and you've built your whole business around this, and that even though it's sometimes not perfect, this is what you believe in, these are your values, and you're doing it anyway, and you're building this beautiful brand. Hey, my friends, if you want to stay in the loop on what's happening in the sustainable interior design industry, you need to get on our mailing list. Each month, we share industry updates, our favorite products and suppliers, and the resources and trainings we're genuinely excited about. You'll also get behind-the-scenes updates and be the first to hear what's happening inside the Design with Impact community. Our newsletter is curated specifically for designers who want to create healthy, more sustainable spaces. Join the list through the link in our show notes. So what should designers, whether they're in fashion or they're in interiors, what should they be looking for when they're evaluating whether a material is truly sustainable or non-toxic?
Exactly. I think nowadays there is something that we can refer to called a life cycle assessment, so an LCA. And the best thing that we can do is a material that you're evaluating, like Deserto has certified life cycle assessment on their material. And a life cycle assessment basically evaluates 5 stages of a material or a product's life, everything from, like, the material itself, so the raw materials, like, what is again, I talk a lot about cactus right now because that's what the primary material that we're using, but, like, just because it's cactus, like, what kind of cactus? Where does it come from? Like, how is it grown? So what are all, like, the raw materials that go into the material that you're using? That's the first stage. How are they grown? How are like, where do they come from? Are there chemicals used, pesticides used to grow it? Um, and then the second stage of the LCA is the manufacturing and the production. So again, if you're just for designers, if you're just sourcing like a raw material, it's just really important to think about like, okay, what is that raw material? Is it cotton and or organic cotton? And if it's organic cotton, ideally, then like which farm is it coming from and like who is picking that cotton and just like really understanding everything, like all the traceability from, the origins of wherever that material comes from. And then if it's more of like a produced item or product, then you have to also not just look at the raw materials, but again, like the production and manufacturing of that material product. How is it getting to you? Again, is it like sourced from some farm in Sri Lanka, and then it has to come, like what is kind of like so it's complex, what I mean? That's why this term sustainability gets thrown around like so easily, and it's almost become irrelevant because it's just like there's so much greenwashing happening because it is very complex. Like just because you might solve one problem that you might also have like a whole other set of problems that again like you're taking it from another part of the world where it's more of a rare resource and the emissions to get it to where you need it to be. Um, and then, but the last thing I also want to emphasize is, so then there's the use phase of like how durable is that material? Is it going to last 1 year versus 10 years? That obviously goes into the assessment of its life cycle because the longer something lasts, then the lower environmental impact it will have. But most importantly for me right now, which is top of mind, is the end of life. So as we know, like waste, microplastics, is a massive problem, and we really have to start thinking and be a lot more conscious of like what is happening at the end of life of the materials and the products and the things that we're buying and consuming. Because it's easy to think, okay, out of sight, out of mind, but it has to go somewhere. So how is it going back to the earth? Is it biodegradable? Is it compostable? That's another tricky thing because a lot of things will say they're compostable, but they're actually only like industrially compostable in, like not just in your backyard compost. Like, if I buy something that says compostable, I'm going to assume I can just put it in my garden. It's going to compost, where a lot of times it actually needs like some form of like higher level industrial facility to make it compostable. So again, it's very tricky, but for designers, I think those two things, it's like looking at the raw materials, where they come from, what is the material, and then what is going to happen, when that pillow or that couch is, like how long is it going to last, and then what's going to happen to it when it's no longer usable.
I feel like it's so much research, and I always say that there's no 100% sustainable solution, and I think that, you just outlined a whole lot of things to look for. So I'm always looking at the same things, like who made it, where did it come from, what is it made of? And, there are some things that maybe, there's a plus because of this, but there's a minus because of this. So I think we make decisions based on the information that we have. We ask the right questions, and then, we make the right decision for the product or the project. In this case, if it's an interior designer working on a project, we can make the best decisions based on the information that we have. Now, you talk about sustainability as a lifestyle, which I feel in my core. Like, I truly feel like sustainability is a lifestyle. Totally agree with you. So, how do you see the connection between what we wear, how we design our homes, and the overall impact that we have?
Yeah. I think the one thing I'll say based on, our just our previous conversation too is that like the most sustainable thing you can do is buy nothing at all. Like obviously anything that's ever produced, there is going to be like an environmental toll. And until we get to the point where everything is naturally going back to the earth and we have full upcyclability and, nature-based solutions and biomimicry happening, then just to live as a human is not necessarily sustainable. But we are human and like I want to enjoy buying a new dress or like enjoying fashion, decorating my home with a nice couch and these types of things. And so I think it's a lifestyle. It's just like veganism. Like veganism, what I always say, it's not a diet. Yes, a big part of veganism is what we eat, but it is what we wear. It's, when I was buying a new vehicle, it's looking at the seats in the vehicle. I ended up buying a BMW because it was the only option where I could get a sunroof and upgraded leather seats that were not real leather seats. And so, same way with sustainability, and like I think veganism really ties into sustainability because there's so much talk around like coffee cups or bring your own reusable water bottle, take a shorter shower. And we can try all these things to be more sustainable or to cut down on our footprint. But at the end of the day, if we are supporting animal agriculture, it is like, all of these little things that we're doing are a drop in the bucket versus, you know, if we are supporting animal agriculture or not, because it is such a big contributor. And so I think it's a mindset. It's a conscious mindset. It's thinking and being mindful every single time you're buying something, consuming something, taking a minute. And now it's so easy. We have our phones. You can easily go onto your chat or your whatever your AI favorite bot is and tell me everything you know about Voes Co vegan shoes or whatever, and it will be like and you could be like, okay, this seems like a good purchase, or yikes, I didn't realize they manufacture we don't, but like this company manufactures in China and they use regular cotton. Okay, like what's a better alternative? Find somebody that's maybe more locally sourced that uses organic cotton, like we mentioned. So I think it's just like it's a mindset of being mindful and conscious with our consumption habits, which involves every single part of our life.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Um, for the designers listening, how can they start thinking beyond just interiors and really consider the broader impact of their design choices?
Great question. I think, again, like as we move to a more conscious society where, environmental impact is at the forefront, we really have to think of things like end of life. Can this design be reused, upcycled, recycled? Um, Innovation in design, like can a table become a chair, become a couch? Like how reusable are certain items, or how, again, like how is it going to go back to the earth? And so I think just again, it's just being really mindful about longer term, not just a solution that's good for today or tomorrow, but like what is that solution going to look
Mm.
like in a year from now or in 5 years from now? And especially when it comes to a home, we know that people move often. We know that, they go through different stages of life. So maybe it's like thinking about like, okay, how could a couch, for example, go from somebody who is single in their 20s to potentially like moving, like, can it go through several moves? Can it be broken down? Can it be kid friendly in the future? Can the upholstery be changed easily? So I guess it's just, yeah, I mean, it's looking at that whole life cycle assessment for not just the materials, but like the products that you're designing and, and making them. That's why we design, like, I'm not really trying to design trendy shoes. I'm
Mm.
trying to design classic, timeless, evergreen styles, like a Chelsea boot, like a sneaker that I know, I've been wearing the same boots for 6 years now. Um, because I know that a Chelsea boot isn't going to go out of style. So I think it's the same type of thing when you think about like design for a home or for interiors. It's really looking at like what kinds of designs stand the test of time and how can they be modern today, but also still useful in 5 or 10 years from now.
Hmm. And I always encourage my clients to try and avoid the trends. And like, people ask, well, what's trendy right now? And I'm like, no, like, what do you love?
Yeah.
Because if you love it, then you're going to love it forever, hopefully. But trends, they come and go. So yeah. So whatever's timeless and classic, will usually last a lot longer. So
Absolutely.
building building a values-driven brand can sometimes feel like it comes with trade-offs, whether that's cost, that's time, scalability. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this specifically and how you've navigated this as you're building your brand.
Absolutely. I think for me, the biggest trade-offs are definitely time. There are costs involved for sure. Like our price point is higher, but we're also trying to compete in like versus like traditional real leather price point with higher quality. And obviously it's a bigger investment in terms of, human labor and material costs. To me, that's not really a challenge because I'm just like, that's just, it is what it is. It's a no-brainer. That's what we want to do. But definitely in terms of time, like our ability to scale and grow as quickly as we want to. It's required a lot of patience on my end because there's two components. One, we're still ahead of the world. You know what I mean? Like this kind of
Mm,
conversation isn't
yes.
happening in every
Yeah.
apartment on the street. You know what I mean? And so even as much as it's like we live it, we know it, we feel like it should be the rest of the world, it's not. And so just having the patience and luckily like this whole vegan movement, like we saw it take off, 2018, 2019 into 2020. And it's not going anywhere. I mean, I think it's here to stay, but now it's like there's still even more movements. There's like the plastic free movement, there's the clean
Mm,
materials movement, there's this conscious movement. And so all of these waves still need to kind of like hit. And I think it's as the younger generation, um, starts to come into power in terms of money and, personal power, financial power, they're going to start to drive those decisions. And at the forefront of their lives has been this environmental crisis. And so I think that that's going to drive it. And so a long answer to the question is that the cost for me is patience. It's time. I have to be willing to wait until the market catches up and the scalability, because we can't just, like in terms of production, we're not doing thousands of pairs at a time. We're doing handmade, small batch, handcrafted. Also every time, even though we're using the same material, sometimes every batch can be a little bit different. So we can't just produce a whole ton because we have to test it. We don't know if that batch is going to be, is going to meet the quality standards. And so yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. Trust me. Like I ask all the time, like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I pioneering like a whole new, like design and brand and company? I don't need to do this, but it's a calling, I think, from my heart, from my soul, from spirit. And right now, I can't not do it. And so, but yeah, it's definitely a give and take. But again, it's like I'm solo funded right now. It's been all of my own time, energy, and money, and I have been hesitant. I am starting to go and approach investors right now because I do believe that there are values-based investors that want to see this change in the world that have money that can put towards it. But I have been hesitant to raise money in the past because I didn't want anybody coming in and
mm.
having me to force me to, sacrifice or cut corners in any way because of the bottom line or because of profitability. And so again, like I always want to stay true to the reason I started for this brand, which is for the animals and for the environment. And there's no matter what it takes, those are the values and again, that's why it's like important. The top of the conversation is talking about values and having really strong values that are just non-negotiables that continue to drive the brand, and hopefully having the patience and the time and the resources to to get through it.
So that's really interesting because I'm finding the same thing in my business. It's about patience, it's about time, it's about education. And I speak to a lot of ethical, sustainable brands, and we all seem to have the same, like, we don't just create these beautiful products or beautiful spaces. We also educate because it's part of changing the culture, and it's part of like we want more of this, and how can we make people see that this is the way to go and this is the future of design. And so it's really interesting. I see all of your educational posts as well, and you're on YouTube. And I think, oh, again, we're not just creators. We actually have to share our knowledge and educate to get more people on board. Um, so I love that you're doing that as well. What advice would you give to designers or entrepreneurs who want to build a business that's aligned with their values, but they don't know where to start?
Great question. First and foremost, they have to know their values. So for me, I spent a lot of time in my 20s and 30s really knowing what I care about. I read a book actually in my 20s called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And through reading that book, it like helps you, it helped me identify like what are my values, what is my like my personal mission statement. So companies are known to have values and mission statements, but we don't often think for ourselves, in our personal lives to have a personal mission statement and to really define and declare our own personal values. And so I think first and foremost, you as a designer, as a business person, just as a person, like it's really important to define what are your top 3 to 5 values, like what do you care about most? And then I guess just like again, taking a minute, going or taking time, go inside, figure out what's really important to you. Like what I don't know if this is the right language, but like what would you die on the cross for? You know what I mean? Like I will die on the cross for animals. Like I will die on the cross now for like nature and planet Earth. These values are so important to me. Again, like I could do something else. I could go back into corporate life. I could get an easy job, get my weekends and my summers off. You know what I mean? But like you have to have very and it's not for everybody. Not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur. So I think it's like if you are and if you want to be, then you have to be very, very clear on like what are your strongest? What are you absolutely convinced about? What is a problem that you absolutely are convinced that you want to solve or want to be a part of solving? And then if that is the case, then what is that next right step in front of you that you can take? Because it's very overwhelming. You see like the huge staircase and think like, how am I going to get from A to B? But it's like the only thing you can do is the next. What is that? For me, it was like, okay, if I don't want plastic based vegan leather, what is the next best option? And it took me a while. Like it took me about 2 years. I had the inception of the brand in 2016, and it wasn't until 2018, 2019 when I started to see that there was actually materials that I could use. And so it was like, okay, perfect. Like that's the next thing is like, well, if I'm going to create shoes with a better material, well, then I need that better material. That's the first thing. And maybe like, what's the name of the brand or like, you know what I mean? But it's just like, it's one piece of the pie that you can eat at a time. Um, and you just keep moving forward as best you can.
I love that. So looking ahead, what excites you most about the future of sustainable materials and conscious design?
It's a very exciting time because, as I've mentioned, I've already named a few of the organizations and the companies. They've raised money. They're developing plastic-free materials that are going to be able to go right back into the earth. And so I feel like we're at this cusp in time. There's Canadian companies developing material plant-based leathers from mycelium, and I know there's a lot coming out from this magical root system of mushrooms, which seems to be like one of nature's powerhouses. And so yeah, I think it's exciting because I think that again, the people that it matters to the most, the younger generation, are getting older, coming into more power, having more money to invest in, these innovations. And even Netflix put out a series about like the plastic problem and infertility. And I think it's just exciting now that it's unfortunate. There's so much damage that we've done, and there's just the choices that we've made are so devastating, but there's nowhere to hide anymore. We're in a time where information is at our fingertips. Transparency is key, and so I think I'm a very optimistic, hopeful person. I hope that we've reached kind of like the boiling point, the climax of like everything that we've done that is not sustainable, that is degrading and harmful is we're just too aware to continue.
Mm.
And that's slowly but surely gonna go by the wayside, and more biomimicry, nature-based solutions are coming to the forefront. Plastic made from seaweed, from algae. Again, like even just simple things like organic cotton, tencel, like all of these really amazing materials that people are innovating. And I think, again, as consumers start to make that shift and put their money where their mouth is, that's going to drive the industry. So I am hopeful, and already like the fact that there's plastic free leather-like materials that are breathable and durable and high quality is just amazing. And so I'm really excited to how much further along we can get in the next, imagine 5 or even 10 years from
Yeah.
now. It's
Yeah.
it's very exciting.
So I've been experimenting with different types of plant-based leathers, and again, I'm looking for something too with no plastic in it. So, but it's interesting to see over the years how the same company, now they're doing better. Now there's less plastic. Now there's a higher percentage of bio-based materials. So it's really cool to see, and I know that companies are trying to get there.
Mhm.
But yeah, I hope that that becomes the mainstream as well. I feel like that's just the way we have to go. So, um,
Yeah, and I think, I mean, one thing is, again, like I've mentioned it, but it's choosing the next best option, the better option. So it might not be a perfect solution. And even, I have to do a lot of education because there's a big part of the leather, and there's fear. Like the leather community, of course they're scared. You know what I mean? They have to pivot. They have to transition. Um, but there's a lot of objections because people will say, oh, vegan leather is just plastic.
hmm,
I think I've said this already in the conversation, but I'm going to say it again. Any option that we can choose that is outside of animal agriculture, the land, the water, the resources, the intensivity to grow food, to feed animals, there's nothing nice or sustainable about this system. And so no matter what option we are choosing is going to be, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of statistics is going to be a better option for the planet, whether or not it is even like has components of fossil fuels or plastic. It's going to be better, and it's going to help us
hmm,
move the needle away from animal agriculture. And that is my main goal, is to like end animal agriculture and get away from that horrendous industry that is just, yeah, it's just
yeah,
completely destructive to the planet.
yeah. And then even you mentioned before, the Deserto cactus leather saves how many gallons of water?
Well, it is
An insane amount.
164,000%. And just to give you
Okay.
perspective, like a pair of our shoes takes 1,000 liters of water. A pair of leather shoes takes 12,000 liters of water. So you're saving about 11,000 liters of water just by, the shoes that you buy.
Wow. There's the animal agriculture portion of it, and there's the water portion of it, and anyways, there's a lot of things that go that go into this. I feel like I'm doing so much research, and I'm looking at all of the materials, and I'm looking at the supply chain of the manufacturers that I'm sourcing from, and yeah, it's a lot. So, but I think we're doing better. I think we're headed in the right direction, mostly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're headed in the right direction. And I just want to see the word vegan, because sometimes I still think it has a negative, in, association. And I think it should just be seen as like, all at the end of the day, all it is love for animals, kindness to animals, and a better environmental solution. So
Yeah.
I hope that, again, it is something that could be associated with a more sustainable option. And again, going back to the conversation about materials, like I talked about nature-based solutions, but like also like regenerative solutions, so that
Mm,
can, I was a partner in a seaweed farming company, and I learned a lot about growing seaweed and like the magical, benefits of seaweed, which is a regenerative crop. So I love to see that there's companies, again, like building fabrics, making plastics from crops that like not only like can sequester carbon as they grow, but of course can like feed the ocean and ocean life and things like that. So there's so much that we could talk about. And I think for anybody listening, I think it's just caring. That's just what it is. It's just having a habit, having a mindset of like caring, and it's like taking one moment to be like, it could I do better? Like, is there a better option with what I'm buying right now or what I'm consuming
yeah.
right now?
Yeah. I love that. And I also look at, you're talking about your values, either as a business or just as, your personal values. And I think that I ask a lot of questions and does this align with my values? And if it's a yes, okay, great. And if it's a no, then okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Because I think it's very easy to, in business and trying to make a living and in life, to say, okay, well, this is the easy way, or especially for interior design, it's like, I really want this client, I really want this project, but we don't share the same values. So is this a project I really want to take on? So I think important to look at those values and stick to them and make them a part of your everyday decisions.
Absolutely.
So, okay, I have one last question for you. I would love to know, what is one misconception about vegan or sustainable products that you would love to change?
I think I talked about it, but I think like the stigma with veganism is, I mean, there is one thing, like vegan means animal free. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the healthier option. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the more sustainable or that it is sustainable. And so I think now that we're getting, that's why we created Voes and Company, because it's like it's vegan and,
Mm,
more sustainable, vegan and inclusive, vegan and environmentally better. And so I think yeah, it's a little bit contradictory because I just said that, like, like the vegan option is always going to be more sustainable than animal agriculture. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can feel good. A bag of chips is most likely vegan. So it doesn't mean that you're like, oh, I'm vegan, I'm like, I'm just healthy all of a sudden. No, it just means animal free, which again, anytime we can choose an animal free option, like, why wouldn't we? That's why I don't understand why there's so much like argument or objection to the vegan movement when it's just like, anybody would, if they saw if they saw a dog in the street hurting, a puppy abandoned, they would go out of their way to help that dog or help that puppy. But
a
as
squirrel,
soon as a squirrel,
a
like
bird. Yeah, yeah, of
a
course.
bird,
Yeah, yeah,
any animal, like
yeah.
humans are genuinely caring people. And they would go out of their way to help an animal in need. But as soon as you ask them to take chicken off of their salad or like replace a steak with mushroom, it's like, like you're the criminal now. And I think it's just a reminder that veganism is just a love and compassion for animals. It's just like the way you feel about your dog, that's how we feel on a large scale for the 1 billion animals that are slaughtered unnecessarily every single year. And it's not just like they're like a cow is like sat on the side of the road, missing its mom. It's like the horrendous treatment. Like we would be in jail if we did this to dogs in Canada.
Mm,
And so,
mm.
um, I guess that's the misconception. It's just like put it into perspective. Imagine if it was a dog on your plate, because that's what we're fighting for, is for the rights of animals. And in my opinion, it's just that we don't need to use animals as materials, as resources, as food. We've come so far in innovation. There's enough alternatives that we can just leave animals alone and let them be.
Yeah. All right. So before we go, you have an offer for our audience. Do you want to share that?
Yes, I am offering 30% off our collection of Chelsea boots. So if you are interested, you just need to go to Voes Co, voesandcompany.com, and the promo code is DWIVIP. And that's just exclusive
Amazing.
for this community, 30% off. So get yourself a pair of
Awesome.
plant leather Chelsea boots that will take you over 300 days a year in Canada.
Amazing. So DWI for Design with Impact VIP. And so you mentioned your website. If anybody wants to connect with you, is there anywhere else they can find you? On Instagram, I guess?
Yeah, Instagram is Voes_at_co. And Desiree Dupuis is my personal account as well. So yeah, chat. Like I'm always
Okay.
online and love to hear from people. Love the conversation, love questions. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. What a great conversation. I really, really love what you're doing with your business. And I hope we can chat again soon.
Thanks, Alex. Looking forward to it. And
All right.
hello and goodbye to all of your community listeners.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to follow the podcast, Share this episode with another designer so we can make an even bigger impact. And leave a review so more designers can find this podcast and we can continue to grow this community. Also, I challenge you to take one sustainable practice from this episode and incorporate it in your business or your next project. And I want to know what it is. Send me a DM over on Instagram at designwithimpact_. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for being here.